Hey, Amy, welcome to the Jeff's Podcast Academy. And guys, if you're listening to this now, you're going to hear a lot about from the person who actually have top 2.5% listenership on the listen notes. I mean, like the global rank, of course, but on listen notes, I saw that if you can go and confirm it, I'm not lying. I put up a screenshot link even in the drive link if you want to believe me. But yeah, so Amy, please tell a little bit about yourself and your podcasting career so far.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff, for having me. It's an honor to be here. Excited to talk to you guys about podcasting. I have been podcasting since 2013. I stumbled my way through it, didn't really kind of know how to podcast, took like a Udemy course and got like the basics, but that's all it taught was like the basics. It didn't tell me how to be successful in podcasting, really, like the things to look out for. And so I learned that through trial and error, really. And so from my first podcast, I went to a second podcast, and now I just started my third podcast last year. And across all three podcasts, which are still available everywhere, I think we have like over 120,000 downloads
Wow.
in some years. So very excited about that crazy number to think about. But I mean, my podcasts are run the gamut of topics, right? So my very first podcast was called Revisiting Haven. It was about a TV show. That's what it was. That's how I started.
Yeah.
And then my second podcast was called Chasing Dreams with Aimee J. It's still live. And that has been the most inspirational podcast for me because I did it to help others find people and listen to the stories of people who are chasing their dreams and are happy with their lot in life at the moment. And then my third podcast, which I just started last year, is called Your Personal Hype Man, because I feel like I'm everybody's hype man. I'm here for you. I think that everyone can do anything they want to do if they put their mind to it. And I just want to cheer them on and remind them, hey, you are enough the way you are, and we just need you to be you. So that's my podcasting career. And, you know, with all of those things and having podcasted for 7 years, you know, I started this year, as of May 2021, I'm going to be launching my first podcast course. So it's very exciting how kind of full circle this all comes.
Yeah, and I was really stunned. I actually kind of went through all of your YouTube videos, like until the first YouTube video which you mentioned, like episode 0, episode where it all starts, like something like that you mentioned in your YouTube title. And then after that, I wanted to see like your equipment now you're having right now with your background or your lightings, your setup and everything. And your first setup that was really different from this one. So even now, it's been for me. Previously, it was just my phone which is about to blast. It was like that. That was my first ever phone on recording. Now it's really great been going on. So just tell me a little bit, like what exactly did happen to inspire you to have these sort of setups and everything. So do you think it's really matter a lot?
Um, so I think you have to have at a minimum certain equipment, right? You have to have a microphone. You have to be able to listen to it in some way, and you have to capture it in some way. Does it have to be this Heil microphone? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My first podcast microphone was a Yeti. And that's because it was affordable and it seemed like the easy thing to do. Now, I know there are two school of thoughts on Yetis, so don't jump me for that, guys. It's fine. I read the directions. It was fine. But you don't have to have the high-end equipment, but you do have to have something. So it really depends on what your goals are for podcasting as to what you want to do. If you're like, hey, I want to have the expensive mic, therefore I can't podcast until I get it, I don't recommend that. I don't. I mean, if all you have is an iPhone like you did, and you have the headphones that can plug in and a microphone, use that, right? One thing I tell people is you got to have your origin story. Unless you start, you're never going to have your origin story, right? We never would have had Tony Stark, Iron Man, if he hadn't been in the desert, if he hadn't gone through the trials and tribulations he went through. We would never have gotten Iron Man. If you don't start with the equipment you have, you won't ever have the origin story to talk about. Back then, I had this microphone. Now I'm here. So I think equipment is important, but I don't think it should be limiting you from actually starting.
Yeah, because one of the main reasons why I asked is that I was actually having one of the conversations with a guy who actually is kind of managing around 30 podcasts in a slot in Hubhopper. Actually, I think you must have actually know about the name. So that hosting platform, in that he has around like 30 podcasts managing, and he was mentioning that like there are tons of podcasters out there who just start. So when people say that you can just start with your phone, there are tons of people who say that you can start a podcast with just a phone, rather than they won't give importance to the content or anything as such. Like tons of podcasts are out there, someone who even dropped. So anything would like to say to those people who really wish to start a podcast, who has this mindset of, okay, I have a phone, I don't have a lot of content, but I can improvise actually. But what do you want to say to those people exactly to grow properly rather than just drop off?
Yeah. So, like I said, when I first started, it was kind of a figuring out and trial and error of what I was doing. I didn't realize I started with what I had, right? I had it. And I figured out what my process was going to be. I was talking about a TV show, so the content kind of came when the episodes aired. But if I had started with a podcast of Chasing Dreams, my second podcast, right? That's when I realized the importance of having at least planned your content. You don't have to have all the content. I think the important part is, do you know if you start from here, how to get to here? So if you're gonna, one of the things we're gonna teach in the course is to plan before you start. So even though you only have the iPhone and the headphones, I think before you start, you need to plan how many. If it's a weekly podcast, I think you need to be able to brainstorm and come up with at least 25 ideas. If it's a bi-weekly podcast, have at least 12, 24, something like that. You want to be able to plan for the future. And what this means is it gives you a runway, right? So you start from here and you're able to get to here, and you're less likely to suffer from what we call pod fade, where you aren't able to finish. You kind of disappear into the ether. You started, you had a lot of potential, everyone was excited, and then you went away because you didn't have any ideas. So the reason I think that people need to take some time, and what I do is I run into what I call dream chase sprints, because I am a dream chaser. And so I call them sprints, where you take 21 minutes, and I don't know if this is going to, is this going to be on YouTube?
Yeah, of course it's super.
So I have a timer, and I put 21 minutes on it. And I start it, and then I use 21 minutes to just write. Don't edit. Just put down the topics and ideas you have. Just write it down. If you're doing an interview podcast, write down the people you would want to talk to. I'm not saying you have to have them already booked and lined up. But if you can't come up with those ideas, if you can't come up with the potential topics, then you need to revisit what the topic and purpose of your podcast is. Does that help? Does that make sense? Because I think equipment is important, but having a plan for your podcast is more important.
Yeah, I think more majorly people drop off because you don't have a plan exactly like what to figure out next. I get that, because I actually try to manage like another 3 to 4 podcasts. One is an 18 plus show, and another one is just having conversations. So mostly different hosts, but it was really hectic for me because I had to do all the editing, I had to do the marketing stuff. It was really hectic to do all the other stuff. But there was plan there. The plan was there, so it was continuously rolling. We were able to get guests, but I think a lot of people get stuck because they couldn't actually find the right content, especially if you're a solo podcaster. It would be really hard. People, yeah.
So to your point, before I had my first podcast, I attempted a solo podcast, and it wasn't really successful or really my thing. Like, I didn't like it. It felt weird. I didn't have topics, right? And then when I was like, you know what, I think I did like 4 episodes and then switched it over to a preview of what Chasing Dreams would be, where I started talking to my friends. But, solo podcasters, it's even more important that you know your content. I told myself in 2013, when I kind of failed the solo podcasting thing, I wouldn't do a solo podcast. But my third podcast, Your Personal Hype Man, is a solo podcast. But I sat down for 21 minutes and came up with specific topics. So I have in my bank 100 topics for me to talk about. And so I don't run out of a topic. And I keep it short. Those episodes are less than 10 minutes, as much as I can. So, solo, you gotta know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
It's tough otherwise.
Yeah, and I think one of the great guys actually the Tim Ferriss show, because even he wrote book about like the tools of giants, because all of that is nothing but a compilation of the entire podcast that he did, like
Yeah.
who actually he interviewed with. I was really wondering like why people praise this guy a lot. I mean, like, has he done something on his own to do all this stuff? But he has done a lot of things on his own just by learning from others, like interviewing people who are into podcasting. So you can learn a lot. I mean, like, if someone comes to you straight to you and ask like so Aimee, why don't you tell me a little bit about like how to start a podcast and everything? If someone texted you on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
obviously you're not going to reply. But if you can get someone on the podcast, I mean, like, they very easily, everyone wants to be on the spotlight. That's one of the reasons. So yeah, that's what really great point that you mentioned there. So Aimee, taking into some of the things that about the success of your podcast. So you have 3 shows right now, and one of the biggest shows is the Chasing Dreams and all of that stuff. So you got more than 250 episodes in right now. And so tell me, like what exactly did you did to make sure that it's actually coming up on the global rank of 2.5%? I mean, like, I don't know whether I'm saying this again and again to make it so weird, but it's really amazing to interview someone on that kind of this height. So yeah.
So I have to say there was a bit of imposter syndrome in the beginning, right? As a woman, as an Indian woman, as someone who was just kind of did a TV podcast,
Yeah.
right? I thought to myself, who am I to do a podcast interviewing people? And so for me, I decided what my message was at the beginning. So this is my North Star. This is what guided me throughout the 200, as of today, 245 episodes. And so that was, I want to talk to people who are passionate about what they're doing, even if it's a side job or whatever. They're happy.
Yeah.
They're happy with what they're doing. And so, in the beginning, I didn't know who to ask. And so the thing I did was I started with my friends. I started with the people I knew who were doing things they were passionate about, actors, business owners, people who were crafty, things like that, podcasters also. And I became comfortable talking because it's just a conversation. And I'm pretty good at having a conversation. So when I took that pressure off by just having a conversation with who the guest is, I think people resonate with that because they see themselves in that person, in that guest. And so I have a wide variety and range of people. And I tried over the years to do just that. And so I would, for the first 200 some episodes, I sought the guests. I found my own guests. And then I wanted to take things up and kind of step it up a bit. And I found a talent manager. So in America, we have these comedy shows and clubs and things like that, right? Late Night with Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon. Yeah. They have these booking agents, talent managers who find the guests for them and are like, hey, I know who Jimmy would want. And they go and find those people. And I thought, what, if I want to keep doing this, I need to find someone just like that. Yeah. So I found my girl, Sarah, who, what she does, her sole job as a VA is to find people who are passionate about what they do. And so as I was, that's when I started the second podcast and the third podcast. And so to juggle everything, you got to ask for help. You got to put systems and processes in place in order to keep things moving smoothly as they are. And so I think the reason people resonate is we started finding people who could relate. Like some of our best episodes, some of them surprise me, some of them do not. And so like, who did I got, oh man, how am I forgetting? Who it was? So we had Lovey. She was on the show. Dr. Freeman Rabowski is president of UMBC. We had a YouTube star. Why can't I remember her name? Oh man, I'm going to find it.
Yeah. Sure.
And I was like, and I'm like, so I tried to find people that people were excited about so that they could relate to them. Right. So, we also looked at certain personalities and things that they were looking at, meaning we focused on Women's History Month. We focused on Black History Month. We focused on Pride Month, which is LGBTQA, right? So there was a way in place that people could relate. And then as you keep going, you'll notice I started actually putting a focus on mental health. And one of the things for me that's so important is mental health. And so Vidya Vox, that's who it is.
Yeah, with yours. Yeah, I actually saw. Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
Vidya
Yeah.
was on the call, and that was huge with people from India, especially because she was on the show. And so people were like, "These are regular people, and they're having these conversations with little old me." And so people related to that. And when we started talking about mental health, people related to that as well because they're like, "I'm stressed. What do I do? How do I get better?" And so it was coming up with topics to your question. It was coming up with people and topics that resonated with the audience. I was trying to give them what they were looking for, not what I thought they needed to hear. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, you have to do this market survey in order to identify like what exactly that the customer needs. And yeah,
Yeah.
one of the important points that you mentioned, that you had really great, amazing guests on the show. So this is a really, really something that people kind of always ask me, like, how can I get my guest to share podcast content? Because if you have Vidya Vox on that, I mean, it's a dream come true. She has a great, Instagram following. She's a great star. She has done a lot of lives, and the podcast is done. And if in case Vidya Vox is sharing that link on her story or wherever it is, even the tiniest, smallest place, it gets a huge hit. Obviously, you get a lot of listeners. That needs to be done. Did she do that, by the way?
I'm trying to remember if Vidya did. This was before stories. It
Yeah.
was before all of that other stuff. I don't think Vidya shared it, but she was also in the middle of an upcoming concert tour. So at the time, I don't think she shared it, but she didn't have to. Just putting Vidya Vox in the social media really kind of blew it up off on its own. I
Yeah.
mean, that
Yeah.
was, I think at that time, it was the number one episode of the year,
Oh.
if I remember correctly. I mean, it blew up on its own. But to your point, you can't make people share your episode. And so it's a hit or miss. What I do is I create a folder of shareable assets. And when the episode is getting ready to go live, so we air on Wednesdays. On Sunday night, Monday morning, we send an email to the guest and say, "Hey, your episode's ready. Here's what it is. You can hear it. You can see it. You can see the pictures and everything we're going to share." And I give them access to that folder. And I say, "Hey, you're welcome to share this. You don't have to." I say, "But if you'd like to share, here it is. And here is some copy that you can use. Like, write it for them.
Yeah.
Make it easy. Write it for them in the email. So all they have to do is copy and paste." So I want to say, of my guests, probably, this is a rough estimate, probably like a 70% share
Oh.
the episodes. So most do, but some don't because they're just so busy that they're just like, "Hey, I'm on there. It's just, it's just another interview." But some people are like, "Hey, I'm trying to be an author. Let me share." So Vidya J is one. She is a New York Times, 2 times New York Times bestseller. And so we worked with her team, sent them an email, and they used our assets in their marketing because they're trying to get people to watch. They're trying to blow this book up because it was a book tour that she did. And so, when they have something to promote, when they have something to share, people will want to help support and talk about it. But you have to make it as easy as you can for them.
Yeah, that's a great point, I guess. But yeah, sending an email, that's a really whole lot of work for a podcaster to be done. Most of them won't probably take that hassle to, most podcasters, like they just, tag you on, story or, on the probably a post probably. But yeah, I think the more effort you take, the more effort they'll also, appreciate that you took, and they will actually kind of distribute, to many platforms. So just a curious question. Actually, one of the things that I did actually to get more listeners actually is that I kind of tried to interview models, so fashion models. So because fashion model, someone who always has high following, so it was like I was just thinking like, how can I get more listeners? So before this Jeff's Podcast Academy, I was having this as the Teen Whisperer show, or I had many names, different names for the same exact podcast. So when I did that, that was my first episode, which got 100 listens. When I did a episode with the fashion model. So do you think it's really important that the guest should actually have a higher following? Because there are tons of guests who doesn't have an Instagram following at all, but they would be like this big guy in the industry who, like, sales reps or even CEOs will listen to, if they have it, talking on the show. But do you think it's actually important to do that?
I think it's more important that the guest aligns with the mission of the podcast. So regardless of their following, right? Regardless of the size, if it makes sense for them to be on the podcast, that's what should guide you as to whether or not to have them on. And the reason is because what happens is that you may be the interview that blows them up. You don't know how it will actually turn out. And so that's the thing that you have to kind of be aware of. So that's one of those things where, we play a part in their journey just as much as they play a part in ours. And so whether they have a big audience or not, that interview that you have with them, that's what people are going to look at. That's what people are going to focus on. If they share it and they have their following, then that's their following that is believing in them. And so they may share it because of the fact that they have it, whether it's 2.5 million people or 700 people. I think there's an impact regardless of the size of the following. It's really who you have on the show and the impact of the interview that's going to make the difference.
Oh, that's really great to know, because I have people who always ask me, like, how to increase listenership. This is one of my techniques that I kind of used, like, to get, into fashion models or people who actually have high following. So Aimee, we have talked about a lot of the marketing aspects and everything and stuff. So just a couple of questions before closing is that, so is it morning or evening then? What's exactly the time?
It's 11. It's about noon.
It's about noon.
Morning, afternoon.
Cool. So this is a question that I always ask my guests. It's a totally out of the box question. Actually, this actually came from Super Joe Potter. That's the question. That guy actually taught me this question. So who was actually the last person that you made smile yesterday?
So it's a tough question because we're in a pandemic. So my audience is limited. But I think it would be my twin sister, Jamie. We were out and about, not dangerously so, with masks and whatnot, guys. And I forget what I said, but I made a joke about something or the way she was doing something, and she just started cracking up because she didn't realize that she was doing that. And I'm not going to go into detail in order to not admit.
No need of that.
But yeah, when you can laugh with family or friends, it's always a good feeling.
That's great. Because sometimes when I ask, like, most people get stuck at the middle. Sometimes it makes them realize that there's someone they care about or someone cares for them. And if there's no one to if they make them laugh, they will think like, are we really that lonely? I mean, I don't want to make them like feel depressed, but that question actually kind of changed my perspective every single time when I asked them. So that's one of the reasons why I asked. And really, thanks for answering openly. So just one final question before closing is that what do you think is actually the best tip in the whole world, according to Aimee, for the podcaster to grow? So this, and the one big disclaimer is that this shouldn't be on the internet. So one big disclaimer.
It shouldn't be on the internet? What does that mean?
So like that tip, yeah.
Oh, the answer shouldn't be common. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So the answer shouldn't be common. One tip to help podcasters to grow their podcast or become
a better podcast. Yeah.
I think networking. So I think just the fact that we met each other in a podcasting group.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's relationships and connections that help podcasts grow, not just in how to make it, but recommendations. People who can recommend someone else, people who can help you edit, people who can help promote. Relationships and networking will help your podcast grow, even when you don't see the obvious result of it. Right. And so I've been podcasting for over 7 years. Yeah, over 7 years. In September, it'll be 8. And I truly think that I began growing as a podcaster once I started networking more and wasn't doing everything on my own. So I
Yeah.
think I would recommend you meet other people, even if it's virtually, and start forming your own network.
That's really a great answer. So, just this kind of last thing that I came to my mind is that I just want to ask in the middle part. I kind of went with the flow. So, you mentioned that to help to get grow more to grow your podcast, or to grow your clients or whoever the podcast might be, you need to ask help. You need to reach out to people like the Sarah. You mentioned her as a VA. So I have people like I have this small team who helps edit the podcast and all of that stuff for a couple of clients. So my biggest fear right now is that because they're freelancers, they're not like being paid at regular intervals. Probably a freelance projects comes, I'll pay according to their shares and everything. So what if they run away sometime, like run away in a sense, like they leave, like I'm not getting this vibe anymore, I have to go. So all of this
Right.
time you're left alone in this whole world to work on with. So any idea how you can manage that? This is to all guys who actually kind of guys or girls, I'm not being sexist right now.
How you do it yourself?
Yeah, so how do you like manage when everyone's gone, like if in case in your situation
Sure.
when Sarah or whoever it is, anyone who's helping you grow is gone, like just went out.
I am a big believer that you should know how to do every part of a podcast, even if you're going to give it to somebody else to do. So, my first podcast, I did everything by myself.
Yeah.
And even when I started Chasing Dreams, because I had did everything by myself, I said, well, you know what? The one thing I'm not going to do is show notes. I don't want to write all of that. That's just it's so much time. But I edited myself. I created the artwork myself. So I think it's important that everybody at least try or become aware of how to do it in case, like you said, for some reason everybody goes on strike or disappears, or there's a vacation and everybody goes at the same time and you have to do it yourself. You know what to do, right? And it doesn't have to be a lot. Like if there's Auphonic, AUPHONIC, right? So if you're like, I can't edit, I don't know how to edit. Well, at a minimum, the one thing you should do is run your audio through Auphonic, and there, it's edited, done, right? So I think at a minimum, you need to figure out this is why processes and systems are so important, because how your podcast goes from an idea to actually implementation and out to iTunes and Spotify and Ghana and all those places, you should know how to do each part. You know how to submit an episode. No, just because if that happens, you could take care of it. So even today, if everyone on my team disappeared because they all went on vacation because they got an imaginary raise I don't have to give them, let's say they all disappeared on me, I could still do the podcast. It may not be as strong or as great as it probably would have been if they did it, but I could do it. And so that's why I think it's possible, it's doable. You just need to figure out what it is that they do before you give it to them.
Nice, nice. So I'll definitely keep this in mind because it's my personal question, but obviously people sometimes may actually kind of have this thought. So Aimee, this is a great conversation. So thank you so much again for spending your time. Is there anything else that you want to ask me, like tables turned, anything at all?
So I think, this is awesome what you're doing and helping to spread the word of podcasting and getting it out there. I think if your listeners have a question, I would say always ask. So I guess I would ask you, when you're stuck in podcasting, as you're on this journey, what do you do?
Huh. That's a tough one. So majorly I will take a detour. Probably I just go to a friend's place, and talk some random stuff. Probably gossip about others. So probably just the normal human stuff. But yeah, mostly I get stuck when I'm not, because this is actually I'm doing this podcast after a really long time. Really seriously, it's been a long time that I've done the podcasting. So I was telling to my co-founder that dude, I don't know whether I'm going to do this right because my talking may stuck. I may stutter because when I think I've lost the touch of it. So yeah, probably what I would probably do is I go to the people, like I said, to find help. That's what I do. That's what one of my fear is. If they go, then if I'm stuck, then I'm stuck forever. That's what my fear was. So yeah, people have always been my strength. So that's what I would always do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. When you're stuck, you just got to take a step back.
Yeah.
You got to take a step back and reevaluate what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what do you do in the worst case scenario. So I think that's the thing to do. One thing I will say as we're wrapping up here is that if you guys are interested in podcasting, one of the things, like I said, it's been 7 years. I just started my first podcast course. But if you want to start with what do you need to podcast, I do have a starter equipment lead magnet that you can get. Just go to aimej21.com/Jeff and you can get it from there.
Wow. So my name is that. Oh, that's an awesome one. That's an awesome one. So any people can find you on socials. That would be great if you could mention them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can reach me on any of the socials. I am on TikTok, but I don't TikTok. Sorry, guys. But you can find me at Aimee, AIMEE J21. I'm on all the socials there. Pretty active on Instagram more so, but just reach out. I'm always happy to talk to you guys.
That's totally great. So, guys, I will definitely link everything in the description below, so you can definitely go and check this out. Whether it's on YouTube or on Spotify or anywhere at all, it will be on the description. And Aimee, again, thank you so much for on the show. It really means a lot that you spend a lot of time. And guys, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, or you can text her, you can DM her, and she'll definitely reply. And thanks again, Aimee. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks.